Everybody's got a gift for something. It sounds goofy, but it's true. There are lots of different kinds of gifts. And we talked about that last time we got together this way. I want to kind of follow up on that because there, there are lots of different ways to look at gifting. And one of the ways I mentioned was you look at these lists in primarily in Romans 12 and 1 Corinthians 12 of spiritual gifts or gifts of the Spirit, gifts given to people by the Spirit. Another way is to look at those things are good categories. Are they the only gifts that God gives people? Probably not. I do think, though, one of the aspects of these gifts that have been identified by the Apostle Paul, Holy Spirit speaking to him about it as he wrote his letters to the church at Rome and Corinth, in both cases, he said the point of these gifts is so that the whole body, the whole church, will be built up, can be helped and encouraged, and can be healthy. In Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, he talks about the church as a body, so that the thumb can't say to the eye, "Gosh, I'm not nearly as important as you," and every part of the body is important. You know this if you've ever sprained your ankle. One time, I've sprained my ankle numerous times. I'm kind of a klutz, I guess. One time, though, I stubbed my little toe on my right foot in the dark and broke it so that if this were my little toe, it was sticking out like that at the joint. Man, that hurt. I had to go into the ER and I don't remember whether I bit down on a leather tong or whether, but anyway, they put it back in place and they couldn't cast it. My memory is they wrapped it with some tape against my other, my next toe. Man, that hurt. And, for a while, I had this limp. The whole rest of my body had to compensate for that one injury on my little toe. Isn't that the way it is in life as a whole? In a family, when somebody has a particular need, the whole family adapts to that need. Now, that can be done in a healthy way, and it can be done in a very unhealthy way. I'm not even going to get into that because it's a whole big deal. But just know, in a church, it can be done in a healthy way, or it can be done in a very unhealthy way, where this, injured, needy member winds up, I don't know how else to say it. It sounds horrible, but hijacking the whole rest of the church, so that the identity and function of the church becomes to take care of this one person, this one problem. That's not what Paul was talking about. What he was talking about is the church is made up of people. God's family is made up of a very diverse group of people. And his intention is that this diversity would continue to grow. And hey, you know what? I'm not talking about this politically correct diversity. I'm just talking about people with different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different cultural biases, and different gifts. See, when we bring our gifts for the purpose of helping other people, that's healthy. Yeah. And if our motive is truly to be helpful, and we're doing this in a mature and balanced way, that can be very healthy. But you know what? There's this thing called the term in the world has become ubiquitous. It gets used all the time for things that it maybe isn't. But these negative, empowering people who continue to, they enable people to continue in bad behaviors, or they bring bad behaviors and keep them going. The enabling thing can destroy individuals, families, and churches. But when you and I realize we have gifts, and when we execute on our gifts and we apply them into a legitimate and sincere effort to help the whole church, all kinds of good things can happen. But you guys already know, I can talk forever about anything, even if it turns out I didn't really have anything to say. I do have some experience with this, though, in my own life and in my observations over 45 years in ministry in churches. There are times when people are less interested in enhancing the health of the church and more interested in the fulfillment they get when they express their gift. Boy, that has a depth of bad and a depth of good in it. See, here's the good. When you apply your gifts, when you express yourself from your giftedness, you're supposed to feel good. I mean, that's just part of it. However, when me feeling good becomes the point, then it quickly edges toward bad. And what was a strength can become a weakness. When you've got a whole bunch of different people who are willing to bring what they have been given by God, and contribute that into the health and the well-being and the depth of God's family, that is very, very good. But when they do that out of a selfish motive of, I need to go feel good for a while. I need to. That's not a horrible desire, but it's not the best of motives for applying your gift. All right, why am I talking about all this? Well, it's because of what Peter wrote in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. There it is. The point of our gifting and applying our gifts is serving. As faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. You already know, if you've listened to me very much at all, that my favorite theme, concept, idea in the whole Bible is grace. And I'm doing what I can. I'm still early in the journey of my life of learning how to live by, with, from, through grace. I really, really want at some point in my life to have come to the point where when people encounter me, they really do encounter the grace of Christ. That the grace of God touches people through me. And it happens some, but boy, my selfishness still gets in the way. This can happen in the application of our gifts. And so Peter says, God through Peter says, use whatever gift you have been given to serve others as stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Stewardship is the second, in my life, my second favorite concept to think about and talk about. Now, I'm not talking about the stewardship meditation, which is basically just a short talk before we take up the offering, right? And I grew up where, boy, that was one of the most boring parts of the service. And if it wasn't boring, it would be a kind of a come on, you guys, we're not going to make it if you don't pony up better. And they didn't use those words, but that's pretty much the message, right? Give more. You're not giving enough. If you love Jesus, you'd give more. That's not this, that number one. That won't achieve the goal that the speaker has in mind, right? And number two, that's really not stewardship. What stewardship is wise management, effective management. Do you remember the parable of the talents in Jesus' teaching, where I've talked about this before, but I'm going to hit it on it again, where there were 3 servants, a very rich owner, master in that culture, that left the area and left various amounts of what would have been money in his day, and not just a little money. I mean, we're talking big money, many thousands of dollars, under the care of these 3 servants. One got 5, one got 2, one got 1. Talent. A talent was a large sum of money. So the master comes back, and the servant who had been left with 5 doubled it, got to 10. Servant who had been left with 2, he did a little more than double and got to 5. The one who had been given 1 didn't do anything with it. Okay, there's all kinds of points to that story. One of the points I see is these first 2 guys that took the money, invested it, somehow leveraged it wisely, and brought a greater benefit from it. That represents good stewardship. The guy who took the 1 and buried it didn't do anything with it. He didn't lose it, but he didn't do anything with it. In the story, he was condemned as if he had squandered it. Good stewards take what they're given and they manage it for its best benefit. I think I've already told you this, but I'm going to say it again. I've selected, finally, after years and years and years, I was in my 30s when I first started. I was confronted as I read, I guess it was about 1990, when I read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of his habits is begin with the end in mind. And he talks about a life mission statement. And I began working on that way back then, and I've revised it and reiterated it probably 4 or 5 different times. And this last time, I realized, as I reflected back over my entire life, my life's mission comes down to 2 words: steward opportunity. If I steward opportunity, then what I'm doing is I am managing the opportunities that God brings my way, permits me to encounter, or puts in my path. I am managing them to their best benefit. Sometimes that means saying yes and going for it. Other times it means saying no, because if I can't say no, I learned this years ago, if I can't say no, my yes means nothing. Because there's only so much of me and my time and my energy and effort to go around. And if I say yes to everything, as I did when I was young, a lot of things drop through the cracks. When you steward the grace of God in its various forms, what it means is you utilize, you manage, you apply those gifts to their best and fullest advantage. It doesn't mean that you every single time you double the return on your investment. That's not the case. I often wish that Jesus had included the guy that got 4 talents, and he went out and he worked really hard and he lost. and he came back and said, "I'm sorry, the market crashed, or I didn't realize, I thought I was doing better, and man, this is all I've got." That guy's not in the picture. I kind of wish he was, because I think that sometimes happens. But a good steward, a wise steward, does what he or she can to make the very most of the opportunities that God gives them to apply their gifts. Stewards of God's grace. Well, my time's up. I'll have to come back. I don't have a lot more to say about this, but there is one or two more things I kind of want to hit on before we move on. That's for next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.